Ready? Hi, everybody. Our project was white-tailed deer, and Bryce is going to tell you a little bit about the animals that we have in our project.
Okay, guys. So this is what you're seeing now is the base. This isn't accounting for anything as far as growth is going to go in the future. You'll see that in our future plans. But as far as breeding goes, as you can see, we're going to have 100 breeding does and 10 breeding bucks. And then for the hunting pen, 20 call does and 20 shooter bucks. And the reason that we have the call does in there with the shooter bucks is because we want to provide the most, I guess, natural experience for the customers. So when the does come into heat, when the people will be coming to hunt, they'll have a rut just like they would in the wild. So just providing the experience as close to wild as we can get, because I know that's an issue for some people that they don't like hunting pinned fence or high fence areas with deer because it's not very natural. It kind of feels like shooting fish in a barrel, and we don't want that. And then back to breeding, on the 10 breeding bucks, we are planning on AIing and collecting. We'll get into that further as we go on. Just some miscellaneous expenses that we have is our property taxes, our insurance, vet, and cost of buildings. And then I'll break that down more in another slide. But we just kind of set aside what we think we would need. We're going to have an account that's kind of like a catch-all that we can pull more funds out of if need be, say for the vet or something happens and we have to make a deductible for our insurance. And here's just a breakdown of our income, which you'll see on another slide. We'll get it more into detail, but our breeder bucks. So as far as our breeder bucks go, most of our income is going to be coming through the babies with the breeder buck, but also through the sale of semen. So we're planning on starting at a base price of $1,500 per straw of semen. And we have it figured up that we are going to produce 2,250 straws, of semen in a year. So we will keep 250 straws for ourselves to give us enough that we can get our does bred. So we can account for any does that don't get bred the first time. We can rebreed them and maybe even a third time as well as if they don't catch. For our weaned fawns, so we have how we have it set up is that we're going to keep 10 bucks a year that are candidates to go into the breeder buck program. We will know at a year of age whether they're going to be ready for, if they're going to go into our breeder buck program or if they're going to get cycled in to replace the bucks that are in the pens for hunting. So we are going to keep 30 bucks, but at a year of age, we will make the cut and see which bucks will be replacing the ones in the shooting pen or replacing the ones that will be in the breeder pen. And as I've said, the sale of semen, I just went over that, about 1,500 bucks per straw. And then the price will change depending on the quality of bucks that we have. For call animals, we are doing a 2% call rate, and we are separating the doe herd and the buck herd. So it's 2% for the does and 2% for the bucks. And then also another thing for shed antlers, we are planning on selling them, and we will be selling those based on a per pound basis as well as the color and quality. As far as that, we also would like to dedicate a empty pen in the fall, or sorry, in the spring when the bucks are losing their antlers, that people can come out and train their dogs to find sheds and potentially even train them to recover dead deer for people. And then, like I said, also the hunts. So we'll get into that in more detail as well. So right now for the paid hunts, how we have it broke down is our hunters are going to have to stay in local hotels because at the moment we do not have any place for them to stay on the farm. We are planning on building cabins in the future where people can stay, and also that would be an extra income for us. But the way that we have the hunt structured, as you can see, is they would get 4 days to harvest. And the way that they would get charged, there's $1,000 deposit that they must put down, and that is non-refundable. If they don't get a deer, they still pay us $1,000. That's just the safety net on our end, and also to commit so that we want to give people a unique experience and them possibly be the only ones on the farm. They can decide if they want that or not, but we want to give them that option so that they can really choose what deer that they want to harvest. We will have a guide. One of us will go out with them, and the price is set after harvest. So we will say our prices start at 151 inches to 160 inches, and that price is $4,900. And that price is taking, you add that in with $1,000. So if they put $1,000 deductible down or deposit down, and they harvest a 151 inch to 160 inch deer, they then have to pay the extra $3,900. And the way that we have set our prices up for every 10 inches increments has a price range. So 151 to 160 inch deer is $4,900. 161 to 170 inch deer is $5,900. So it goes up in $1,000 increments as the deer get bigger. And that's also on our part. We have to know what the deer are scoring in a rough amount within the 10-inch increment. So if someone looks at the deer and say, I want to harvest that deer, we can give them a price, something that they're going to be happy with. I don't want them to shoot a 180-inch deer and then we tell them, oh, you have to pay $7,900 now, and they were thinking it was going to be $4,900. So that's on our end, that we have to know what our deer are doing and having good knowledge on the deer that are on our farm. And like I said, on the sheds, we're planning on selling on a per pound basis. And then based on the color and the uniqueness of the horn, we will price accordingly for that. So like a more desirable, like really white, heavy horn is going to go more for something that's got a bunch of chips in it and doesn't weigh as much, just like that. And then again, we'd really like to get people out on the farm to train dogs, maybe for recovery, as far as someone shoots a deer and they can't find it because the blood trail's gone thin, can the dog find it for them? So we want to provide a place for people to come out and they can train their dog in a fenced area. The dog's not going to get out, run away. It obviously being an empty pen so that they're not harassing our deer as well. But just a place to get the community out and seeing the farm and getting familiar with us. So here is our finance breakdown. So the number that you see from the fawns here are the fawns that we will sell directly after weaning, after taking the 30 deer out. And that's with the replacement does, which is going to be 2 replacement does because of our 2% as of now because of our 100 head herd. So, and the fawns that would go into our replacement program, whether that be for the breeder or the shooter pens. So we would gain approximately 117,000 from fawns, and that's at a base price of $1,500 per weaned animal. No discrepancies between if it's a fawn or a buck, because if they're not making the cut, we don't want to charge somebody. The $102,000 number you see from the hunts is assuming that all 20 of our bucks in the pen are harvested. Obviously, that's going to fluctuate a lot depending on how many hunts we sell, and the amount of interest we actually do have in harvesting the animal. We will have over 3 million in semen sales if we sell all 2,000 straws a year, which we don't anticipate having any issue with that because deer semen seems to be a very hot commodity. Call animals at $3,000 is going to range depending on if we want to call breeder bucks or not. Because if a breeder buck is doing good and then we have another one that's really good, we may get up to, I don't know, 15, 20 breeder bucks from that base 10 that we have because we want to grow and get bigger. And then also for the shed and dog training, asking someone to pay a small fee to come out, whether that be 20 bucks, just depending on how many dogs are going to be out there and how long they're going to be out there. That's going to be on a per case basis, depending on how much we charge them. So after adding all that up, we're approximately about 3.2 million in annual revenue, not accounting for any of the expenses. So this is our finances continued. This is our expenses. So based on the 299 acres we have, the property tax is going to be $35,000. Our insurance and license fee to actually even be able to raise a deer is $50,000. And then we would like to set away $10,000 for a vet, and that includes all of our AIing for our deer, darting the bucks to collect, all that. Miscellaneous repairs or any repairs as far as equipment, chutes, fencing, we set away $10,000 for that. Fuel, $5,000 because fuel is getting very expensive this year. Improvements, whether that be for facilities for the deer or setting aside money for the cabins. And then for the farm account, we would like to put $1 million in it this first year to kind of give us a safety net as far as, I guess, anything happens, we have a huge disease outbreak in our herd, we can cover the cost of replacing those deer if that time falls in between when they have fawns or not. So if we lose half our herd and they don't have any fawns on them, we're going to be hurting pretty bad because we're not going to be able to get our replacements that we want, and our genetic enhancement is going to go down a lot because we lost a lot of animals, and any progress that we made would be gone. So we want to make sure that the farm is going to continue and succeed. And then at the end of it all, split evenly each way, we would pay each of ourselves $690,000 a year. So our business is very lucrative, but you have to spend money to make money, as you can see.
So as Bryce said, we are going to be located here in North Central Ohio, actually on the Ohio State ATI fields where we have the handling facility. We took all that property that is on there. It's exactly 299.7 acres. You could put 7 head per acre, so roughly 300 acres that we'll have. And we'll break down later on what it's all going to, but we're going to row crop, we're going to have hunting pens, we're going to have just regular pastures. So we'll break up our ground pretty well.
For monthly nutritional requirements, this chart pictured on the slide is a good starting point, understanding what white-tailed deer, bucks, does, and fawns require during the different months of the year. Pretty much all year, they will have carbohydrates, and then during times of like bulking up is when we will add protein. For our 3 months stored forage, we will have corn silage and raw soybeans. We require 50 tons. We will feed our stored forage January through March. The average white-tailed deer eats approximately 6 pounds of forage a day, which is roughly 1 ton a year. Since we have 150 deer that we will feed, we will need 900 pounds a day, which is 81,000 pounds in 90 days. That comes out to 40.5 tons, but we will store 50 tons just to be on the safe side. To get into the nutritional aspects of corn silage contains 25 to 30% dry matter. It contains a high starch content, high protein efficiency ratio, relatively high content of digestible energy and nutrients. The average crude protein is 8%, while the average crude fiber is 23.6%. The average gross energy for corn silage is 18.9. The average calcium is at 2.1, while the average phosphorus is 1.9. Corn silage is highly digestible and palatable. Going over to our other aspect of our stored forage, soybeans. We will be feeding raw soybeans. Raw soybeans have a dry matter of 86% with a crude protein of 40.9%. Soybeans are a good source of protein and energy. They will provide degradable and soluble protein to the diet. The soybeans have a total digestible nutrient of 91%, with calcium at 0.28, while the phosphorus is at 0.65. So January through March, bucks, does, and fawns will all need carbohydrates. The fawns will be our replacements from the year before. The bulk of requirements for January and February are carbohydrates. In March, does will not only need carbohydrates but protein because it will create heavier fawns. Bucks and fawns will continue to get mostly carbohydrates during that time. And then for our grazing pasture, we will have Durana clover, pearl millet, chicory, rye, winter wheat, and oats. We will feed our grazing pasture April through December. To start off, Durana clover alone can produce between 2 to 4 tons per acre. Durana clover has protein levels between 25% and 30%. The total digestible nutrients have a range of 65 to 85%. The calcium level is at 1.5 and a phosphorus level of 0.4. The magnesium level is also at 0.4. Durana helps maximize body and antler growth of bucks while optimizing milk production for nursing does. And then the second aspect is pearl millet. Pearl millet has a crude protein range of 12 to 14%. Pearl millet has a gross energy of 4,480 kcals per kilogram. It has a low potential of weeds, and it is good for breaking up soil, high root density, and vegetative vigor. Then we can move on to chicory. Chicory has a protein level between 28 and 30%. It also contains calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sulfur. It is a fast-growing plant that has wide planting windows. It is also very hardy and has deep roots. Chicory is also good at withstanding drought. And then rye. Rye has a crude protein of 12% and a new energy gain of 59 mcals. Rye has a total digestible nutrients of 53 to 63% with a net energy gain of 0.24 to 0.38 mcal per pound. Used as a good cover crop and a valuable fodder, it is also a good nutrient cycler. Winter wheat has crude protein levels of 17.2%. The total digestible nutrients is 89%. Calcium is 0.04% and phosphorus is 0.43. Although they are low in calcium and phosphorus, they have adequate amounts of protein for their diet. And then for oats, oats have a crude protein content of 13% with a net energy of 52. They have a high fiber content and they are able to add energy with a lower potential to cause bloat or acidosis. Moving on to April. In April, the bucks and does and fawns from the previous year will need carbohydrates and protein. In the spring, bucks need to rebuild muscle from the previous winter. Protein has a direct correlation in the growth of antlers. April is the time that bucks will grow new antlers by the end of spring. Does, on the other hand, are preparing to fawn. Nursing does will lose body fat while others are still pregnant, having to provide nutrients for the fawn. And then for May, May is a protein-packed month for bucks, does, and fawns. Bucks are rapidly increasing antler growth. Does, on the other hand, are providing for new fawns and trying to recover from fawning. The does are losing nutrients to the fawns. If the does are getting adequate nutrition, they are able to pass it on to the fawn. And fawns from the previous year are bulking up by eating a protein-rich diet. And then June through August. The fawns of this year will be nursing from the does during this time. In June, bucks and does need protein and sodium. During this time, we'll be supplementing salt blocks. They will need an increase of salt because of daily intake of water is increased. At the end of the summer, the fawns will start to wean. August is when protein becomes more important in a fawn's diet because they are being weaned. Protein is important to increase muscle development and growth rates. And during this time, fawns are still nursing off the does.
Okay, moving on from September through December, the bucks and does are going to need carbohydrates, and then the fawns are also going to need carbohydrates as well as proteins. So, like Caitlin said, we plan to plant rye, winter wheat, and oats out there so they can have that as well as their silage and soybeans out there in the winter months. We just plan to add those to get them through, give them the extra protein to get them by. They're pretty hardy animals, so they're going to be able to forage on that as well as what we're giving them.
So for diseases, we have hemorrhagic disease, chronic wasting disease, mange, parasitic worms, bovine tuberculosis, and brain abscesses. Hemorrhagic disease, it is a bloodborne disease spread by flies. Early stages include fever, thus making the deer go to water to cool, which is why the bodies that die from it are usually found in water. Other symptoms include swelling of the head and tongue, and then, of course, respiratory distress. It is not always fatal, and deer can develop an immunity to it. And then chronic wasting disease, it causes brain degeneration. Symptoms include fever, excessive salivation, loss of coordinate movement, and extreme weight loss. Moving on to mange. Mange is a skin disease that is transmitted by mange mites. It causes hair loss, pus-filled lesions, and thickening of the skin. And then parasitic worms, they are passed from deer to deer through feces. Lungworms can cause severe respiratory distress, which can cause pneumonia and eventually death. And then stomach worms are found in the stomach and cause emaciation, which if left untreated can cause death. Bovine tuberculosis, it is a bacterial infection in the respiratory system. It can take years to develop. Signs include coughing, nasal discharge, and difficulty breathing. Lymph nodes will show the infection, and as it progresses, the deer will get lesions on the surface of their lungs and chest cavity. And then for brain abscesses, it is a bacterial infection that is caused from head injuries. Head injuries can be caused by fighting and abnormal antler growth. It is most common in bucks, and they occur around the forehead or antler bases.
This is just going back to what I talked about earlier as far as the stud bucks, making sure they are mature and they meet our standards as far as what we want for genetics. And what we really want for genetics is antler growth, as whether that be breeding for replacement bucks or replacement does. Both are equally as important as far as genetics go for getting the antler growth that we want. And as I said before, collecting the bucks, we plan on collecting over 2,250 straws a year. There's a pretty short window for that, and making sure that the bucks are ready for that is key, because it's normally collected within 6 weeks. And so, and when you collect, you actually have to put the bucks to sleep, and it's done, I wouldn't say full surgically, but semi-surgically, because they are under anesthesia, and that's very stressful for the deer, as well as stressful for us, because there is a greater than normal chance that we will lose the bucks when they're under anesthesia, because they don't do very well underneath of it. And then, like I said before, as far as calling goes, a 2% calling rate. And this is just explaining what I did earlier. As far as the shooter bucks, that should actually say 151. That's my bad. But for 4,900, and then, like I said, price increases as $1,000 in 10-inch increments. So, for example, my 185-inch buck would be 6,900. And then, as I said before, putting those cold does into the hunting pen to give those bucks a rutting action to provide a unique experience for the hunters.
So the four main aspects of the does are breeding time, gestation, fawning, and number of fawns. The does are bred between September and November, with it mostly occurring in October. Sexual maturity usually occurs at 16 months of age. After sexual maturity, they exhibit seasonal polyestrus. The estrus cycle of a white-tailed deer occurs between 17 and 22 days. Female white-tailed deer will go into heat for 24 hours. The gestation of a white-tailed deer is 7.5 months. And then fawning occurs in the spring and summer, mostly April through June. The number of fawns differ from deer to deer. They can have between 1 and 3 fawns at a time, with 2 fawns being the most common.
As for fawns, we plan to wean at 3 months of age, and the ones that we're going to sell, we are actually just going to sell straight from mom for approximately $1,500. Sometimes does can be worth more for that for them. And then the keepers, we're going to separate off into 2 pens because we don't want them to start breeding at too early of an age. In captivity, the males can start to develop faster, so they will become more sexually active a little bit quicker. So we're just going to keep them separate in different pastures so that we don't have any accidents with them. And then once they go through the weaning process, the females are just going to go straight back in with mom and go into our breeding facilities, and then the males will determine if they're going to the shooter buck pen or if they're going to be keepers. So our 1-year farm layout, as you can see, we have hunting land that we are going to do 20 acres dedicated to that. And that's going to be that dark black shaded area. Our total acreage, like we said earlier, was roughly 300 acres. And we are going to dedicate roughly 60 acres to row crops. You can see the purple splotches are going to be where we plant our rye, winter wheat, and oat plots. The red is where our barn and workspace is. The brown spot is going to be our work pad. We're going to put like our silage storage, our equipment, and other miscellaneous things there. The orange is where our sick pen is and other like handling facilities. So if we need to bring the bucks in, we'll put them there and work them right there. The blue dots are going to be where we plan to have waters, and we don't plan to put in any shelter because deer are technically native or wild animals. So they do have wooded areas that they'll be able to get out of the elements if they need to, but we didn't feel necessary to put up any sheds of any sort because they are naturally wild animals. And here again, we plan to row crop. We showed you our hunting pasture, the breeding area, kind of self-explanatory just based off of that map. So for our 5-year farm layout, we're going to increase acreage. We plan to go across the road where the other ATI farms are. We're going to hopefully put in a store to sell other miscellaneous products. We're obviously going to increase herd size as we keep more females and males. And then we plan to put in hunting cabins for our guests to stay in so they don't have to go to hotels anymore. And you can see those green dots in the corner. That's where our hunting cabins plan to go. And like I said, there's, again, we just want to expand. We want to get bigger. We want to add more space for people to stay. Obviously, for the hunting cabins that are closer towards the pastures where you're going to be able to see deer, we plan to maybe make more a little bit expensive because you are going to have more views. You're going to be able to see the deer and such. So that's something we want to keep in mind that we possibly may do. And then here's our 10-year plan. Obviously expand more. We are going to have, in the end, 900 acres even. You can see we got another very large hunting pasture that we are going to put in and more hunting cabins. Going to increase herd size, sell more products. So just kind of keep expanding. Again, just kind of new products like urine and other different miscellaneous things. And then this is our works cited. Does anybody have any questions?